Hey everyone, welcome to today's show. I'm Jay Everett, and on the program today, what do you need to know if you own a home, if you're selling a home, or if you're buying a home that has a septic system? Answers today from an expert in the field. Everyone, so welcome in, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. His name is Eric Wilson, and Eric, would you mind telling folks who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, my name's Eric Wilson. I'm the vice president of a company up here in Sparta, New Jersey called Wilson Services. Also the principal of Wilson Engineering, which is another company, which is just me. But a bit about myself. Jay and I actually went to high school together, so a long time ago we knew each other and have recently reconnected, and it's kind of funny how that goes in life. But I went to college to New Jersey Institute of Technology for civil engineering. I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and with the experience in land development, bridge reconstruction, kind of did a bunch of different things in the engineering world, and then came back to work with my my dad and my family business. Third generation owner here at Wilson Services. Gone by a couple of different names over the years. William H. Wilson Contracting Company. We did some street sweeping in the 70s. So done a lot of things, but today what we're focused on as a company is septic service for residential homes. We do businesses as well, but predominantly our customers are residential homeowners. We do septic servicing, which includes all the maintenance activities that you would normally do as a homeowner, in addition to repairing homes, which happens a lot during a home sale transaction, which I know is a lot of what your questions today are going to be on, Jay. And then we also install complete new systems, which happens a lot in a real estate transaction as well.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for that. That's great context to get to know you. Now, as you alluded to, a lot of times in a transaction, there is a conversation about the septic system. What do homeowners need to know about selling a property that has a septic system?
Sure. That's a great question. So really, when you're going to sell your home and you have a septic, there's just a couple things you should be thinking about, and just know that kind of like when you bought your home, hopefully you hired a home inspector to come in and check out your house, and hopefully you hired a septic inspector to check out your septic. Usually your home inspector that's going to check for termites and do that all other stuff, usually they're not going to also be a septic inspector. Interestingly enough, it's kind of a weird thing in New Jersey. I think it's really hard for a home inspector to become a septic inspector. There's like extra license requirements for them that even though a standard septic inspector, there's no certification process. They basically just sign a paper and say, hey, I'm a septic inspector. That's about all it is. You can't do that as a home inspector. You have to go out and get some kind of some classes and things. So that's what I've heard from some licensed home inspectors, that for some reason the state made it complicated to do both. But anyway, what I would recommend if you're considering listing your home in the next year, that it's probably a good idea to have a septic inspection company come and just be proactive about it and have them come check your system out. A couple other tips: you don't want to pump your septic tank right before an inspection. You do want to pump it, in every 3-year maintenance cycle. If it's been 2.5 years, you're going to want to get it pumped out. But just remember, your septic tank, it depends on your home and the size of it, but usually they're between 1,000 and 2,000 gallons. So if you pump that thing out like 3 days before you're going to have your inspection, the guy's going to come and it's not going to be full because you're not going to have used enough water to fill it back up again. And what happens is if they see a tank and it's not full, that usually leads them to believe it's leaking, which is a big problem and not something you want to lead them to a false conclusion on. So that's why people say don't pump before an inspection. You certainly should pump it, but you're just going to want to leave yourself a week or two, if not more, between those things. And then just something else to be aware of: if your septic, maybe you bought your home 10 years ago, or I think, what's the average time people stay in a home now, Jay? Like 5 to 7 years, something like that?
That's approximate, yep.
So, if you bought your home 5-7 years ago, early 2012, 2013, and that I guess that's 7-8 years. In 2012, the New Jersey DEP issued new regulations governing septic systems. And from a water quality perspective and an environmental perspective, it was a really good thing. And a lot of the changes they made vastly improved on the old code. But what that means is a lot of systems that kind of like might have, swept by, under the radar in the past won't have that luxury anymore. So For one example, something that you used to be allowed to have, and was kind of common, especially up here in North Jersey, that you're not allowed to have anymore, is you would have a septic system. Let's say they had a basic, real basic, just a tank and a pit right in the yard. A lot of times they would have a separate seepage pit just for like their laundry or their kitchen sink or their shower or something like that. And the logic was when they would put that in, hey, we're going to overload the septic, so make it last longer, we'll put another pit in over here. And even in the logic that as you hear that going through, you're like, so why didn't they just build it big enough in the first place to handle the whole house? It's just not how people did things back then because it was cheaper. Problem is the DEP now recognizes those additional seepage pits as cesspools. And a cesspool is basically, one level above an outhouse in waste treatment technology. So basically there's no treatment happening there. So you're not allowed in New Jersey to transfer a home with a cesspool. So what happens is people have a septic system that maybe in 2011 passed an inspection, but now it won't because the new code says, yeah, you're not allowed to do that anymore. So it's kind of like a catch-22. People catch themselves. They're like, oh, it's working fine. I don't understand it. And sometimes there's cases where you might not be having a problem where there's backing up into your house or anything like that, but the septic's just not up to snuff anymore and may require replacement.
Okay, yeah, so that's really helpful for folks, especially if you have a home that you don't necessarily know the age of the septic system, or you do know and it's older, that's something really to consult with a septic inspector on before.
And that's why I would say just have an, I mean, it might cost you $500, but if you have that inspector come out and look over the system well before you list, you just won't have any surprises, and you'll be able to know, hey, I might have to handle this as part of the sale. Rather than you get a sale, you're getting ready for the closing, and then all of a sudden they hit you with, oh, by the way, you have to replace your septic system, which is not fun.
Of course. And, from the other side of things as well, like as a buyer, what are some of the common things that a buyer should be looking for in that septic report that they need to understand? Because those are things, as you alluded to, that can be expensive things to remedy or to negotiate around in a transaction. What are the things that buyers should keep in mind and emphasize when they're looking at that inspection report?
Sure. So the first thing I would say, especially if you're a buyer and it's your first home, or maybe you're moving from a part of the state where you have a sewer system, so this is your first home on a septic, it can really seem like this intimidating, scary thing because you're like, man, if I mess this up, it could cost me like $30,000, $40,000. And what I would say is you don't need to be afraid about it. You just need to get educated. So there's a lot of great resources available on the internet. We have stuff on our website. You can also check out the NJDEP's website, US EPA, some different.
And what's your website, Eric?
WilsonServices.com. A number of blogs. You can also find us on Facebook at Wilson Services. You just look for this logo here. Is our Facebook page photo there. We try to post a lot of helpful information for people to help them be educated for buying and selling and just general maintenance as well. But so the first thing I would say is educate yourself and learn about septics in general and some of the maintenance things that you're going to have to dealing with when you own the home. But number one recommendation is get a septic inspection. Find a company that you feel you can trust, either that you got a good referral through your agent, or maybe you were able to check out their online reviews, something like that. One kind of like funny thing with the septic inspection industry is, and we perform septic inspections in addition to repairs and maintenance, things like that. And there's a number of other companies in New Jersey like us that do the whole package. If that makes you uncomfortable because you don't want to, have the inspection and the repair from the same company, it's not a problem. There's plenty of companies that just offer the inspection. One thing just to be not wary of, but just be aware of is you'll see sometimes companies advertising certified septic inspectors. And there is no process to become a certified septic inspector in New Jersey. Usually what they do is they go to Pennsylvania or another nearby state that has some kind of certification process, take a quick test, and then they advertise themselves as certified. Not saying that they're, bad people, but just be aware that there's no, if you see one company that says it is and one that doesn't, it doesn't really mean anything in New Jersey to be a, quote, certified septic inspector. A bit why we do offer the whole service, because I know that's a question I've gotten, Jay, from a lot of other realtors is, hey, why do you do the whole thing? And honestly, it just comes from a perspective, I mentioned when I was introducing myself, I'm a professional engineer in New Jersey. Every septic system today, when it's replaced, has to be designed by a professional engineer signed and sealed drawings, and submitted through the health department and permit and inspection process. And that's not terribly new in the new home building world, but in the replacement world, when my grandfather, first started the business, and even in the 90s, he would go to the local health department and say, hey, I need 8 permits, and they'd give him 8 single sheets of paper that would say like address, name, and then plan on the bottom half of an 8.5 by 11, and he'd draw a square that says house, a circle that said septic, and that was the plan. And that's how you did things 40 years ago, but that's not what you do today. So people might not be aware of what's involved in the replacement process, but being an engineer, I see the design side of things. I see the construction, the whole process of it. And we started offering the inspections just because, at least in our area, we felt that our communities and our homeowners in our area were being underserved in the marketplace by the companies that were out there, because there was really nobody offering that complete package. And not that it's bad to hire a company that solely does inspections, but we see them sometimes give advice that is a bit lacking in overall understanding of the situation. Like they might say, hey, the tank's leaking, you should replace it, and we'll come back and finish the inspection. It's terrible advice, because if the field is also bad, you could spend $10,000, $15,000 replacing a septic tank only to find out you wasted the money because you have to do a whole new system. And we've seen a couple people, unfortunately, go through that. And so if I can help people by offering the full package solution with a company they can trust, where we can just handle the whole thing for them and they know it'll be done right, I think that that's a great solution for some people.
And that makes a lot of sense. And,
yeah.
When you were alluding to that fact that people sometimes get partway through a solution that they think is going to get to the heart of their issue and it doesn't, obviously you're talking about potentially thousands of dollars in difference in the type of work necessary. So what are the types of costs that people need to understand in terms of being linked to some of these potential construction issues and replacement issues around their septic systems?
Sure. And in a sense, that's a tough question to answer, because the reality is every single property is different, right? And depending on the part of the state you're in, you get up in some of the towns up near where we're based in Sparta, Byram, and there's a lot of lake communities up, and there's a lot of bedrock, and these houses might have been built as lake cabins in the 50s, 60s. So their septic system when they were built was like a 55-gallon drum in the side yard. Like, I've seen some crazy stuff up here. Contrasted with maybe you get down into, closer to Route 78, and you might have some bigger rural area properties where you can build a gravity traditional septic system. But
sure,
with the way the code is now, the requirements you meet, between the surveying work, the engineering work, and the construction, we tell people to expect to spend between $35,000 and $45,000 all in to replace a septic. And that's not I've seen plenty of projects, especially when you're talking a house that's in a difficult spot where you're not right off the road, you don't have easy access to the job site. You might have to go like over the woods through the river to grandma's house kind of thing to put it in. And those projects could go upwards of that. I've seen septic systems run $80,000, $90,000, but that's definitely not the standard. So I don't want to scare people with it, but just to be, if you're buying a home or you're selling a home, it's definitely something you want to start the process and get a sense of, to contact an engineer. The engineering process and the surveying, you're probably going to spend about $5,000, $6,000 to do that. And it seems like a lot of money, but to spend that money and have some reasonable expectation of what the total spend is going to be on the contracting side of things is probably the best thing you can do. Because if you're just trying to pick if you say to me, hey, Eric, can you come over to my house and tell me how much it's going to cost to replace my septic? It's really hard to do because I don't know the soils under the ground, and there's stuff that we'll find in the design process that we don't know. So that's why I give you that range. And you might say, wow, 35, 45 grand. $10,000 is kind of a huge range, but it all depends on the specifics of the property.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, start to finish, people might not be familiar with the fact that, a percolation test or things that are telling you about the soils or, the engineering involved, and just the permit costs, right? Those are all things that that add up just in the preparation stages. You know, my wife and I just had to do that ourselves in building a home and figuring that
Yeah.
out in the truest sense, like you said, on a new property. That's just the norm now. So, you know, if it's a replacement, that's still the same process. So people need to keep it in
Correct.
mind, you know, and when they are going through that process, Eric, what are the things that you and your organization counsel folks to look for in a contractor that they're evaluating and going with, or, you know, getting different quotes? And some of them are very different quotes. Like, why is that? And what do you say about, you know, choosing a contractor wisely in that sense?
Sure. And well, I just in kind of a final answer to your last question, there will be a scenario that you could find where somebody replaces their septic and it costs them 25 grand. But I give the range of 35 to 45 because 80 to 90% of the projects we do fall in that range. So that's where I stick. Like, you could find the oddball that will be cheaper, kind of like you could find the one that'll be more expensive. So I'm just going to give you, you know, if you do the bell curve thing, if you remember that from statistics class in college,
Sure.
give you the middle. So if you have an issue and you're looking to hire a contractor, kind of like you would, similar things that you would look for if you're going to hire somebody to remodel your kitchen or to build your foundation or build your home, there's a couple like real simple, real important things you want to do. You want to get a copy of their insurance. Now in New Jersey, believe it or not, any work that you have a contractor do for you that's over $500, they're required to give you a contract. And that contract is required to include their insurance. A lot of contractors don't do that. And it's not like you're trying to catch them or anything, but if you just ask them, hey, can I have a copy of your insurance? If they're a legit operation, they should provide that to you either upfront or even if they didn't upfront, without question. And the only thing which most people don't do is when they give you that, it's like an Accord insurance form, it'll tell you like, hey, they got $1 million in coverage per occurrence, whatever. You might understand that. You can call their agent, which is listed right on that form, and say, hey, I got this policy from a contractor I'm considering hiring. I just wanted to make sure that this policy is still active and in force and that everything is on the up and up with them before I hire them. And they might not give you specific information about the contractor, but they'll be able to confirm for you that that insurance is active. Again, it's not something that a legit operation is going to do, but I have heard of scenarios where some contractors that are trying to, you know, in a sense, cheat, save money, will buy an insurance policy and then cancel it, but they'll keep handing out that paper. And if you don't call and double check it, which really only takes a little bit of time, it's just a little way you can do to protect yourself. And then just the other thing I would say is look for a company that has some share in the marketplace, if you will. Like, you know, if they've done no other work in your town or in that community, that's not necessarily a bad sign, but it's just if they've done a bunch of work in that town or community, it's another thing you can use to build your confidence in them. And then lastly, I'd ask them what kind of guarantees they offer, what kind of warranties they offer on their work product. Is it, you know, do they have a 5-year warranty? Do they have the tail light warranty where as soon as the tail lights leave the street, it's gone? You know, things I think are good things you can ask for. And obviously you can look to online reviews and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, absolutely important to know that you're going with someone who's not cutting corners, because that can have implications for the costs that you have.
Oh, absolutely. It can end up costing you more to hire the cheap guy. Oh, I didn't fully answer your question. You had asked about like, what do you do when you get a bunch of quotes and they're really different ranges? There's not an easy answer to that, because is it possible to find somebody who's going to do it for quality and cheap? It's possible, but it's unlikely. And the reason I say that, not that it's like some kind of like law of physics or anything, but a lot of times you'll hear in the contracting world people say there's 3 things that you can have, but you can only pick 2: quality, speed, and price. So if you want it done well and you want it done quick, it is never going to be cheap. If you want it done well and you really have no time frame, I mean, there's a company up in our area that they do okay work and they do it quite a bit cheaper than me, but they have jobs that last 6-7 months and I do it in 7 days. So it's just a difference in what you're looking for. And that's the kind of thing that you can, if it's a company that you don't know anybody that's done work for, you could ask them, hey, could you give me some client references that I could reach out to, find out how the experience was working with you guys. And, you know, if they're a contractor that's done good work, they'll have clients that'll be willing to talk to you, you know?
Sure, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, helpful reference point. And, for someone, if they are looking to avoid an expensive outcome and they're looking to maintain what they already have as a homeowner, I know there's some conflicting information out there. You alluded to having a septic system get pumped at least every, 2 to 3 years. I think you said 3 years. What are the other things that are important for someone to know so that they don't have to get multiple quotes and have a replacement system put in eventually? What's that like to maintain? What's the best practice?
Sure. So the most basic maintenance that everyone should always do on their septic system is we recommended every 3 years to pump your septic. Some communities, especially lake communities, will have an ordinance that require that at a minimum. We got to either get a permit or submit a receipt, and that's how they track it. But even if you're not required to do that by your local ordinance, every 3 years, absolutely, you should pump your septic. And if you live in a home and you got 6 kids, you should probably do that a little more often, every 2 years. You can't really pump it too often, but when you let it go 4, 5, 6 years, what's happening is the sludge levels in the tank are building up, and you're decreasing the efficiency of the treatment in your septic tank. And as that efficiency of treatment decreases, more and more waste is making it out to your drain field, and that's ultimately what causes them to fail. So pumping is by far the best thing. It's not terribly expensive. Considering you're doing it every 3 years, the typical septic's going to cost between $300 and $400 to pump out, depending on how big their tank is. Some other maintenance things: if you have a newer system, it'll have a filter on the septic tank. You should get that clean. Some homeowners do it themselves. It's not terribly hard to do, but it's pretty gross. Because if you think about what you're filtering, it's unpleasant. But we have clients that clean their own filters, and the filter cleaning runs everywhere from 3 months to a year. It all depends on your usage and kind of what you eat. Not to shy away a bit from the industry. The reality is what we're dealing with here is
This is real life, real talk.
real life. It's the aftermath of your diet. That's another maintenance thing. And then one other thing I'd like to address is a question that comes up pretty often from clients and a lot of realtors I speak to. Because, I deal with a lot of realtors like yourself, Jay, because when somebody's buying or selling a home, you're really the first point of contact they're going to go to for advice. So I try to, every opportunity I have to talk to somebody like yourself and arm you guys with that knowledge, I think is a great opportunity just for the community as a whole. But they say, what about additives, right? I'll pick on them just because they're a brand name you can go buy at any Home Depot. I've been putting Ridex in my tank for 20 years, so it's going to be fine, right? I hear that a lot. And the thing is, it isn't going to hurt your septic to add an enzyme or a bacteria product, especially a bacteria product. But the reality is, unless you got some kind of special situation, like which isn't most people, but I know, for example, if somebody's getting chemo treatments or something for cancer, or they're taking real heavy drugs, there's not too many scientific studies on that yet. But when you consider that you're processing something potentially through your body in that scenario that's going to kill everything living that it touches, what makes your septic work is a bunch of living microbes and bacteria. So if you have some specific scenario where they might be getting killed, it might be a good idea to supplement it a little bit. But under normal conditions, you shouldn't need to treat your septic with any kind of an extra product. At best, they won't hurt it. At worst, if it's a product that's just breaking down the waste and keeping it suspended in the water so you don't have to pump your tank as often, that isn't really eating the waste. It's just going out to your drain field and could actually cause you bigger problems. So I would just say that there's a lot of septic companies that the way that these products are marketed is to a septic company. And I mean, because we've had them call us. I get a call from some salesman from some bacteria company almost monthly and say, hey, let me tell you about a way that you can increase your margins on your pumping calls. And I say to them, well, can you show me some kind of case study or example where your product extends the life of a septic system? And none of them can produce something like that. If you look at a bottle of it, it'll say scientifically proven to eat waste. Okay, but the question isn't, does it eat waste? I mean, that's what your septic does naturally. Does it extend the life of your septic system? Over 30 years of spending hundreds of dollars on this product every couple months, do you get anything for it? And these companies have been around for 10, 20 years, 30 years, some of them, and I have yet to see one that gives me any kind of confidence that using it regularly is going to actually improve anything. Like I said, there are specific scenarios where that'll work. For one example where it is potentially used, but it wouldn't be a scenario where you as a homeowner just going and buying off the shelf. You asked if there's opportunities other than replacement. If you have a home and you're not planning to sell it anytime in the near future, but maybe you're having a septic problem, there are some remediation options that can be pursued. Obviously, the best one is to replace the system. But if you don't want to spend 40 grand and you're trying to say, hey, I want to get 10 more years out of this thing, it's kind of like you got a car, right? And it's in the shop and you're having a conversation with a mechanic. He's like, look, man, this thing's got 250,000 miles on it. It's got these problems. You should probably replace it. But, we could do this to it. It might cost you $5,000-$6,000, but it isn't going to cost you a whole new car, and you'll get some mileage out of it. There's kind of similar stuff we can do to a septic. We can do an aeration treatment where we basically blast pressurized air down into the soil underneath it to break up all the compacted soil. We can put hydrogen peroxide treatment into the soil to eat the biomat waste that accumulates in there. Or sometimes you can combine an aeration treatment with a bacterial treatment to basically boost the bacterial levels so that they'll overeat the waste in the field over a defined period of time. But those scenarios wouldn't be your standard homeowner. The product says, hey, put a cap full in your toilet every month. That's not what that would be. That's kind of a special scenario where you're trying to solve a specific problem.
Sure. So something that's going to really be a temporary boost for your system to operate a little bit more effectively over the near term or medium term.
Where you're trying to remediate a specific situation. But again, if you're trying to do that, that's usually something you're going to be working with a professional, whether it's a contractor or somebody who's knowledgeable on trying to resolve those situations. Usually when you're adding a bacterial in that environment, you'd be doing it with a professional. It wouldn't be something you bought off the shelf.
Sure, absolutely. And, for anyone else, Eric, who might not be accustomed to anything other than off-the-shelf options,
Sure.
Someone who hasn't had to work with a company like yours in the past, what are the other parting wisdom pieces that you would share? Anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is really crucial for someone who might be listening or watching today?
Sure. I guess I would just say that the modern septic system and sewer systems too is what allows us to live. There's a lot of aspects of our lives today that we don't really think about that we take for granted, right? Hot water in your home, the fact that the drains always work, and people flush things down the toilet and think it just miraculously disappears. They might not really actively think that, but they kind of act like that. And so in that context, whether you're on a sewer or a septic system, no matter where you live, there's some stuff that you really should not flush down the toilet. And there's kind of like, when you say it, well, what should I flush it? Sounds kind of funny, but we stick to the 3 Ps, pee, poo, and paper. Outside of those 3, you probably shouldn't flush it. Feminine products. One of the big issues, it's been an issue for a while now, but especially in these last few months where people have been cooped up in their homes, it's been a bigger and bigger problem, both at their home septic systems, but sewers as well, as both the flushable wipes and then personal protective equipment like their masks or maybe the Clorox wipes they might be using to disinfect their home right now. Those products should be thrown in the trash, not in the toilet, because they don't break down. And if you're on a sewer system, a lot of times what happens is you might be able to flush it, but what happens is it could get clogged up and damage or block your pipe system. Even if it gets through your plumbing and it gets out to the pipe in the street, it could end up blocking up the pipe for your whole neighborhood or your whole town. And you might not see those costs in the same way that a septic homeowner would, because you're not paying for the plumber or the drain cleaning company like us to come out and fix it for you. Your town's paying for it, but you're going to pay for it in the form of increased taxes or sewer bill fees, things like that. So everybody can do their part by sticking to the only flush the 3 Ps.
Excellent. Well, and I appreciate your philosophical perspective. It's definitely true that living in a developed society in a lot of ways is a reflection of how fortunate we are to have these systems that serve us in this way. So I really appreciate your perspective, and thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay. Anytime.